Welcome everyone to our annual Old Settlers Picnic. I am pleased to see so many familiar friends and family, as well as many new, young faces of those visiting their birthplace or who have only recently located here. Many of you have traveled from as far as Iowa to be with us today. I have been asked to say a few words about my experiences and memories of our town and surrounding community. And although I am not prone to public speech making, I shall proceed if I may indulge your patience. I was born near Albemarle Sound in Perquimans County, North Carolina, on January 21st, 1799. My parents were Joseph Moore and Mary Newby Moore. Belonging to the Society of Friends, we were opposed to slavery and found our continued residence in a slave state to be repugnant. So in 1818 we traveled to the West, where the promise of inexpensive land and a new life awaited. My parents, siblings, and I settled near the town of Salem in Washington County, Indiana. At age 23, desiring to embark upon my own adventures, I formed a partnership with the firm of Booth and Newby of Paoli, Indiana, in which Mr. Newby provided $1,500 and I was to furnish $500 in my services to conduct a general mercantile business at some good point in the central part of the state for a term of 3 years. I came to Brown Township, here in Morgan County, Indiana, in 1822 and established the first trading post in the township along the Wetzel Trail, which followed what is now known as the Waverly Road near the Rooker Trace, which itself was an old Indian trace near the present Indian Cemetery. The trading post was situated in a log cabin of Charles Vertrees, a blacksmith who had recently vacated the premises, not too far from White Lick Creek, a few hundred feet north of today's railroad bridge. In 1823, about a quarter-mile south of where Mooresville stands today, I built my cabin on a hill not far from the town park, in which we are gathered today for our Old Settlers Picnic. In my trading post, I sold, among many items, calicos for 37.5 cents per yard, which were a most popular item, as well as buckhorn, which was used to make cutlery. I traded in all manner of household tools and appliances, foods, fabrics, and other goods. I worked there for 3 years until 1826, when my partnership with Mr. Newby was completed. My net profits during this period were $3,000, which was sufficient capital to construct a new general mercantile store upon the northeast corner of Main and Indiana Streets. It was the first brick and wood frame business in town, and is where the Odd Fellows Building and Please Mills dry goods store stand today in 1885. The structure was erected by Joshua and Nathaniel Carter, carpenters, and Samuel Harriman, mason. In 1824, I started a lumber mill upon White Lick Creek, just west of my trading post, a little upstream from Simon Moon's mill. Much of the lumber was sold to build houses, barns, and businesses in town and across northern Morgan County. During the 1830s and 1840s, I also dealt in horses, once shipping 100 head to Virginia, which then sent them to Cuban sugar plantations. In 1834 and 1835, I opened a branch mercantile shop and pork packing plants at the Bluffs, along the White River, near today's Waverly, and in Martinsville, working with Mr. Worthington and Mr. Mitchell. These investments during the 1840s amounted to over $30,000. I recall, in 1842, shipping pork on 22 flatboats on the White River from Martinsville, bound south to Madison, and then south upon the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. In those days, state-issued currencies were unreliable, and so thousands of dollars of business was conducted upon open accounts, with little or no cash changing hands. There was great risk, as farmers ran accounts months at a time, and a poor crop, or livestock disease, could cause disaster. Great profit could be had, but equally great losses were often incurred. I made and lost many fortunes. I often bartered in goods. I traded pork for cotton, sugar, and molasses in New Orleans, and in Philadelphia, pork traded for fabrics, silks, farmer satin, prunella cloth, delaine, eastern linsey wool, and indispensable red flannels. I shipped these down the Ohio River to Madison, then overland and upstream along the White River. It was also imperative to insure against losses during shipment. In 1839, for example, I insured against loss hundreds of pork barrels and over 50,000 pounds of pork shoulder, bacon, and ham. In the early 1830s, I built a grist mill just south of town upon White Lick Creek, which was one of the largest in central Indiana. Our ground grains and general merchandise were shipped downriver to the southern markets. For many years, I also leased land to folks raising livestock on the west side of town, near the Macy and Jessup homesteads. I am often asked about the secret to my success in business. To this, I attribute hard work, educating oneself to trade intelligently, and, above all, fair dealing and honesty. When I began my trading post, I freely bartered with everyone, including Indians living nearby. All were welcome in my establishments, provided they were honest and above board. Early settlers in Brown Township were faced with many challenges. The forests stretched unbroken for many miles. Settlers cleared the land of trees and brush. It was commonplace to have tree stumps of oaks, sycamores, elms, and maples sufficiently large to place a team of horses and a wagon upon a single stump. The resulting lumber built the homes, barns, and businesses of our community. Wild animals were a continuous concern. Bears and panthers attacked livestock throughout the 1820s. Rattlesnakes were often encountered. Game was plentiful during those pioneer days. But let us return to the town's founding. In 1823, I purchased 160 acres, upon which Mooresville now stands, for $2 an acre, from land grants obtained by Andrew Clark and Jacob Jessup. In 1824, with the assistance of Barclay Burroughs, Asa Bales, and William Hadley, a surveyor, I platted 20 acres for the town. The original plat was 4 blocks of 5 acres, 16 lots each, bounded by Clay Street to the east, Washington Street to the north, Jefferson Street to the west, and Harrison Street to the south. I selected the highest hill upon which to place the center of town, Main and Indiana Streets, because White Lick Creek flooded in the spring, and we wished our town to avoid that calamity. The plat was recorded in the Morgan County Recorder's Office on February 21st, 1825. It was our design that our town would be populated by honest, industrious, temperate citizens. I did not make a public land sale for 16 years until 1840. Instead, I sold and, in some cases, gave away land and houses to those I felt were of upright character. In the fall of 1824, Asa Bales built the first house in Mooresville, followed by houses constructed by myself, Charles Wilcox, William B. Harold, and Dr. Curtis G. Hussey. Dr. Hussey was the town's first physician. He was so poor that I gave him a horse to use in his practice. He later became a millionaire in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the foundry business. He remembered my small kindness by donating the bell used at the Methodist Episcopal Church, among other charitable gestures, to Mooresville. Our town grew quickly. By 1835 and 1837, there were some 31 businesses within the town itself, including many merchants, cabinet makers, saddle and harness makers, furriers, tinners, potters, coopers, blacksmiths, wagon makers, shoemakers, tavern keepers, and tailors. By 1831, Mooresville's population exceeded 200. By the late 1830s, it exceeded 300. Modern conveniences began to trickle in. I brought the first cook stove to Mooresville in 1839. On April 15, 1828, I married Eliza Worthington of Madison, Indiana. We met during one of my trading trips to Madison. Eliza died in 1873. We had 5 children. Jane, Mrs. Robert Newby, who died in 1852. Joseph died in infancy. Elizabeth died in childhood. Mary M., Mrs. Washington Conduit, died in 1853. Margaret Fogelman now, still living, and my granddaughter, Miss Ida Fogelman. Eliza was a Methodist, and I was a Quaker. As a result of our marriage, I became a Methodist. Eliza founded the Methodist Episcopal Church in Mooresville. We donated land on Washington Street in 1839 for construction of the church building, next to the cemetery, which was established in 1829. It is where my wife and children are buried. I shall be buried there one day. Eliza was a tireless champion of education. She helped establish the Mooresville School Society in 1828, building a brick schoolhouse on Washington Street, replaced in the late 1840s by a frame, 2-room structure. Both Eliza and I, along with the Friends Church and many prominent citizens, funded the Friends Academy School, constructed in 1861. Students from across central Indiana boarded in town to attend the school, which provided the finest education available in the region. Our townswomen opposed the operation of saloons in Mooresville. Secret meetings were held at the Methodist Episcopal Church during the 1830s, and ladies from prominent local families, the family names you'll undoubtedly recognize, Carlisle, Dakin, Lasley, Compton, Arnold, Ballard, raided groggery shops and busted up their wares with axes and hatchets. The women were tried in court and fined for property destruction, but I, along with many other gentlemen from town, paid these fines. Few saloons attempted to operate in Mooresville during the following decades, although several conducted business outside of town. Alcohol may have played a role in Mooresville's oldest murder mystery. John Cox once ran a tavern on Main Street since 1834, and in 1838 a stranger rode in from Waverly past Days Hill east of Mooresville. He appeared to be suffering from some illness and asked to spend the night at Cox's establishment. Charlie Rusi, who was then 11 years old, did chores for Cox, and Cox sent him home early. The stranger was gone the next day, but, strangely, he left his saddlebags. Weeks later, the stranger's brother visited town, claiming his brother, now missing, had left Ohio carrying $2,500, heading west to buy land. Both the money and the stranger had disappeared. Soon thereafter, the temperance ladies drove Cox from town, and he briefly lived northeast of Mooresville. 30 years passed. When Cox, who had since moved to Iowa, died, and an accomplice made a deathbed confession that he and Cox had murdered the stranger and stolen his money. In 1881, John Wilson unearthed a man's skeleton along the East Fork of White Lick Creek, just south of Town Park, where we stand today for the Old Settlers Picnic. Dr. Amos Regan pronounced the bones to have belonged to a 35-year-old man, fitting the missing stranger's age at the time of his disappearance. I am sometimes asked about the Underground Railroad in Morgan County. Beginning in the 1830s through the 1850s, many families, especially among the Friends, in and near Mooresville provided shelter and food to runaway slaves. My family left North Carolina because of our opposition to slavery. It was our Christian duty to assist those fleeing captivity to escape to Canada. I met Levi Coffin, the great abolitionist and Underground Railroad conductor, when he traveled to Morgan County to discuss arrangements. Those of us blessed with some manner of wealth were ready and eager to lend our hands to this honorable cause. This was all done in strict secrecy, since slave owners' road agents were everywhere in Indiana searching for runaway slaves. Even now, 20 years after the end of the Civil War, our citizens do not openly discuss it, except among trusted family and friends. Although we abhor violence, slavery had to be abolished, and sadly, it required a horrific war to accomplish this goal. Freedom has been hard won, and racial struggles continue. But I foresee a future when superficial distinctions, such as race, national origin, religion, or even gender, shall not be used to divide humanity. We will all be valued and accepted as human beings. I have lived in 4 homes in Mooresville. I will note one particularly. My son-in-law, Washington Conduit, married my daughter, Mary, and built their house on West High Street. Soon after their marriage, Mary died in 1853, and Wash could not bear to live there longer. So Eliza and I bought the home and lived there ourselves. Mary continued to live in our hearts, and so we felt her presence in the house that was to have been hers. In 1870, John D. Carter began our annual Old Settlers Picnic, for which we are gathered today. In 1877, I donated 5 acres of land to become town park, where the picnic would continue to be held. My only conditions were that the site would be used for community gatherings of family and friends, church activities, and agricultural shows. I forbade frivolous uses, such as baseball or horse racing, and I prohibited gambling or serving alcohol. On New Year's Day, 1875, our town's citizens honored me at a public ceremony. "This is your day," Dr. Parr said to me at the gathering. "It seems so," I replied. I was presented with a fine gold-headed cane purchased by the townspeople. "My friends and fellow citizens," I said, "I thank you very much for this token of your kindness, and it is a comfort for me to know that in my declining days the people of Mooresville desire to aid in making the remnant of my life a pleasant one. I shall keep this staff as long as I live, in remembrance of the New Year morning of 1875. Our time grows short, as our friend and photographer, J.P. Calvert, awaits our assembly for our old settler's portrait, so I shall not detain you much longer. At this, the Old Settlers' Picnic in the year 1885, we acknowledge not only the courage, ingenuity, and perseverance of those pioneering souls who settled this community. I hope it not immodest to count myself fortunate to have been among them. But we also acknowledge our town's future in the guise of our youngsters here today, plus those who shall join us here in latter days. Ours is a community based upon education, opportunity, a sound work ethic, and a commitment to family and faith. We proud few of Mooresville and the neighboring areas will continue to thrive so that our community will grow strong well into the coming centuries. It has been a fine home in which to spend a lifetime, after all.